Дорогие друзья, ну, обниматься, целоваться мы можем бесконечно, но все-таки у нас достаточно ограниченное время и большое количество докладов, информации. Поэтому просьба рассаживаться, особенно экспертов наших. Коллеги, ждем вас. Ну что, добрый день, дорогие друзья.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're kicking off our conference that will deal with promotion of participatory budgeting. And frankly, I had a few concerns that we would have a semi-full audience here, but we have about 80 to 90 people present here, which is good news. So hopefully we will have a very intense and business-like conference today, and we look forward to an exciting discussion of engaging citizens in budget policy. Just as a reminder, we will kick off with a plenary session. We'll talk about new horizons for citizen engagement. My name is Dmitry Shatokhin. I represent a Russian region, Republic of Komi, and I represent the Committee for Budget and Financial Markets. We have a great number of speakers and presenters, so for those of you who need simultaneous interpretation, please make sure that your devices work. Let me start off by sharing some good news with you. Hopefully you will share it with me. First, the organization committee of the forum has decided to carve out a whole conference for participatory budgeting. I know that in previous years, on previous occasions, we only approached this topic, but the good news is that today we have a separate session to talk about this. A few years back, a colleague of mine from the Ministry of Finance was a bit skeptical about participatory budgeting. He said, well, what is the big deal about participatory budgeting? It's an optional track. But 3 years fast forward, we're talking about it as a separate standalone event. And it's good news, and it's really exciting to see so many familiar faces here. And the good news is that we're all collectively and jointly promoting this initiative. And I can't think of any other agenda that is advancing so vigorously. And the other news is that tomorrow we have the day of the financial expert to celebrate. So we'll have a cause to cheer tomorrow. So let's get right down to it. And I would like to introduce our speakers. This is perhaps the most numerous English-speaking group of experts. So this is truly an international panel of experts. Our first expert is Andras Horvai, who is director of the World Bank Moscow office. It's good to see you. Juan Pablo Guerrero, who's the director of GIFT, Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency, with headquarters based in Washington. And let's give a round of applause, colleagues. Adria Duarte, the International Observatory for Participatory Democracy. Yves Caban, a professor emeritus from the University College of London, and Alexei Lavrov, Deputy Minister of Finance of the Russian Federation, who will join us a little later. He's currently attending concurrent session, and we will give the floor to Alexei Lavrov. And let's give a round of applause. Oh, speak of the devil, Alexei Lavrov is here. Let's give a round of applause to Alexei Lavrov. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Larisa Kalinchenko, Deputy Chair of the Government and Minister of Finance of Stavropol Krai, and Anna Harchenko, Minister of Finance of the Sakhalin region. And one other comment. She doesn't have the title of Deputy Governor. As an introduction to the topic today, let me just say that participatory budgeting is moving aggressively. We have covered 51 regions through the LISP project, and the number of projects in 2017 has increased 15,000 projects. In terms of financial costs relative to 2016, the volume has doubled. In 2016 and 17, we were talking about 5 million to 7 million rubles. Currently, it's 14 million rubles, which is equivalent to 200 million US dollars. So let's get right down to it, to the bottom, to the nitty-gritty of participatory budgeting. And our organizers have identified three factors. Local authorities are looking for opportunities to exercise their powers, especially for local self-governments. Participatory budgeting is a good way of implementing their ideas in urban planning, social policy, and they're getting it done. One other thing is that over the past 10 years, when we first started with the participatory budgeting practices, we finally managed to find a model for engaging citizens and engaging the business community. And the third aspect is that we're lucky to have the World Bank and the Ministry of Finance as partners. There are dedicated institutions working in this area, and thanks to this strong methodological support, we are moving in leaps and bounds. Of course, we as the Russian Federation hope that this practice, that our practice in advancing participatory budgeting will be taken on board by the international community, the Western Europe, Central Asia, etc. In terms of what we will be talking today, we'll first talk about new horizons that open up in advancing this agenda. We will talk about new forms of participatory budgeting, income-generating projects, youth participatory budgeting initiatives. So new horizons are emerging, and we will be talking about them today. First off, I would like to give the floor to Andras Horvai for introductory remarks. You have 7 to 10 minutes. You are a true partner to us, and the World Bank has been our partner for 10 years. And 2 years ago, we have achieved a new level of partnership when you signed an agreement with the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation. So, Andras, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Здравствуйте, добрый день, дорогие коллеги.
Hello, colleagues. Good afternoon. I understand Russian, but it will be best for all if I spoke English.
If you allow me, I would continue in English. And I mean, this is one of those events that I love to attend. I love the concept. And I have to tell you a little bit of the history. Some of my colleagues would be bored because I keep repeating myself. But before doing so, I would like to thank the organizers for allowing this opportunity to take stock of the experiences we have, but also looking into the future how the initiative budgeting program would move forward. And I will refer to some of the innovative practices that we are testing with some of our regions. But I would, first of all, would like to welcome colleagues from 2 regions in particular, but also others who are in the audience, those who started with us, Stavropolsky Krai, and those who came very recently, but are experimenting with really new ideas. So I'm really grateful. I think what I like in this program is precisely the testing of ideas with regions and then using them across other regions. And I said I also would like to welcome and thank you for colleagues from different countries to share their experiences and of course those participants from the PEMPAL countries who are attending today. That's something that you may want to consider in your own countries. I think it's a really interesting experience. And I started by saying that I had doubts, and I had actually major doubts. I've been trained as a macroeconomist, and you know, when you look at things from a particular heights, you see it differently than when you go and talk to local communities. And so 25 years ago, when I came across the first projects, many of them financed by the World Bank in different countries, which were called community development or CDD projects, community-driven development projects or social funds, I had my doubts about the efficiency of spending, the way projects were selected, the fact that most of these funds were not incorporated into the budget, and there was very little buy-in from local participants in terms of their own contributions. And these were mostly financed by external resources, so they were very good in terms of providing services to communities, but they were not necessarily sustainable. Once the external resources dried out, they basically ceased to exist. And so when I see, but once I started to go and talk to local communities, your vantage point changes tremendously. And what you see is, and that's especially true for the Russian experience, is that it's a game changer how you do these things. And the game changer is that the dialogue or the trust between local communities and local governments can change if you set it up right. And if you ensure that there is buy-in, that people actually have to contribute some, and that there is a stake they have in those investments, then it changes the way how decisions are taken. And I think both the trust component and developing the dialogue between civil society or local communities and local governments and the transparency of what is being done is extremely important. So I think there are 2 aspects of the Russian model which I particularly like because of the shortcomings I've seen in other instances. One is that this is on budget. So this is part of the budget, and it's a question of how the budget decisions are taken. And the second one is that there is a requirement of certain contribution by local communities, and it's at times very difficult. There are some communities which are very poor. I visited some of those. So it's very difficult to raise those funds, but you would be surprised to know that they do that. And the other thing is which is counterintuitive. So I use this example very often. I visited quite a few of these communities, and every time when I meet with local communities, I learn a lot about the decision-making process. So I went to one of the poorest regions of Russia, very, very far away. And so we drove up to this hall where the meeting was to take place, and there was no road. I mean, that was, you know, you cannot call it really a road. And so you get there and you meet the local community, and I asked what decisions you take, what do you want to do? And they said they wanted to redo the soccer field. And I was stunned. And, you know, we were leaving the place, and I was talking to Ivan, and I said, look, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, there is no road. Why do they want to do the soccer field? And then I started to think about it. I mean, this is a community where there are a lot of students, children, who have nothing to do. I mean, really the opportunities are very few. And the community decided that it's more important for these children to have actually some activities than doing the road. And this is where my macroeconomist thinking went completely off track, because this is nothing that you can, from that heights of looking at the economy, ever think of. And I think regional governments who are also a step away or 2 steps away, could not have thought that this is what the communities want. So I think that's the power, and maybe you smile at the example, but I think that's the power of local community decisions. Now, just a few facts. You mentioned already a few. We started with the first local initiative support program in Stavropolsky Krai, and it's fantastic to have you here, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, who were involved in the first program, and then we went from region to region, we went to like 8 or so, when the Minister of Finance fully embraced the idea and started the larger scale collaboration. We have 3,500 municipalities already implementing in 30 regions some form of participatory budgeting practices. There are 10,000 projects that are being implemented across the country, more than 1 million people every year participating in the decision-making process. Now we have more than 50 regions participating in the joint Ministry of Finance World Bank effort. So I can say that this is now scaled up basically to the country level, and that's very nice. Now, there was one point that I was very uneasy about, and my team was very uneasy with me about, is that I wanted to have an evaluation of the impact, because I said, I mean, these are all anecdotal evidences, but I want to see some numbers. So I had to do a little bit of arm twisting, not too much, because they also appreciated the need. So we did an impact evaluation through the program financed by the Ministry of Finance, and we found, comparing those groups where the participatory budgeting practices took place, compared to the ones where they do not take place, there was a higher satisfaction with the quality of life in the community, higher satisfaction with the local governments, the service delivery, and I think there was an increase in the trust of the regional governments. And I think this is what you want to see as the outcome. You want to see, you know, happier people living in their communities and more trust between the communities and governments. Now, let me just briefly say a few words about innovation. So we went from, you know, the LISPs, the local initiative support programs, mostly focusing in rural areas to urban, and then also we went from smaller to larger. So we were testing the Portuguese model, which is moving to larger scale investments, but also a different way of implementing the consultation process, more enhanced, including technology. And also we are experimenting, in fact not we, it's the authorities in Sakhalin experimenting, introducing the system for youth. And I think that has tremendous power, because this is the generation which is going to be in power shortly, and for them to experiment democratic institutions and ways of decision making which were not necessarily there some years ago, I think it's very important. We are also introducing budget literacy in the program. We had a separate program with the Ministry of Finance on budget literacy, but it's a very useful way of integrating the two efforts. And I think young people who are able to understand what doing a budget means, how it's being implemented, monitored, and so on, would make them very responsible citizens. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. Спасибо, Andras, и за видение.
Thank you, Andras. Thank you for your vision and for the very particular project. I particularly like the project related to the soccer field. Now I know exactly why we succeeded in hosting the World Cup. So there are many examples like that, but there was a pretty loud statement made yesterday by one of the bankers in Russia who suggested that we should leave the World Bank. I think that we are going to be against it, because the World Bank is really a very valuable partner to us. We will never do that. So let me remind you that you are able to pass on your questions in writing. We have helpers who are here. So here they are. So you can pass them on, your notes, your questions, and they will pass them over to us. And we will definitely read them up and try to answer them. Now, let's pass it over to our regions. Let's invite the Stavropolsky Krai to share their experience. They're one of the leaders in the participatory budgeting area, and they are involved in a number of events. Unfortunately, the governor couldn't make it to participate in our event personally, but when we listened to his presentation at the Federation Council when there was the topic of relevance considered there. And you have been implementing this program for a number of years, and you have a training center and other institutions, and you even had a year of promoting and supporting local initiatives, which was a brilliant idea. But I think still the key point, it's not even a report about your achievements, but still share your experience, how you managed to maintain the bar so high, and how you maintain to retain citizens' focus of attention so well. So, and what would be the right starting point? What kind of pitfalls could be avoided? So please, Larissa Anatolyevna, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, friends, I'd rather say. As a matter of fact, we have been implementing the local initiative support program for a number of years, and we have expanded the scope, and we increased manyfold the number of parties involved in this practice. Nevertheless, the first practice in this country was the local initiative support program. So, and I will never stop thanking our partners and the World Bank in particular, because the innovative solution was proposed by them. We have adapted and adjusted it to the Russian soil, but the idea per se, and I'm sure you will share this opinion with me, the idea per se is brilliant. I would add a ramp for moms with prams, but it's quite realistic to do it by means of the local initiative support program. So a group of initiators would support and would submit their request, and it will be a win-win outcome. Everybody will win. So you can come to pmsk.ru to get more details. This is kind of a commercial, if you like, which we demonstrate in line with our advertising campaign and promotion campaign for this program. So, and it's only a 20 or 30-second message which actually conveys the message. So it starts with making a proposition, and it's easier to do it at the rural level because most of our population lives in the rural area. So then it is actually packaged or wrapped in the documentation which we as bureaucrats need desperately in order to do the competition screening process. It means that we make the projects compete, not the municipalities compete. So in both administration, business communities, and public at large are involved in that. By implementing these programs year after year, we try to achieve the main goal, development of local communities. Why does it happen? Just in response to your question, Dmitry, how can we maintain interest in that? How can we do it? It's just because the program has been implemented for a while, and this program enables unlimited opportunities to participate. So the request can be submitted annually, and this is kind of incremental effect which we have enjoyed. So when you see in green here the regions or the districts which have been operating for 11 years, and the locations which are winners in their projects, often enough, these locations demonstrate quite different landscape. They're quite different compared to what they used to be 10 years ago. I invite you all to come to Stavropolsky Krai to see what you will get if you continue exerting your best efforts as we did. The geographical expansion path was quite even. We started with the most challenging areas in the eastern part of our Krai, where the living standards and the incomes of the population were quite low. That's why we started our work there. Starting from 2017, as it was correctly mentioned, the project was expanded into the overall territory of the Krai. And in 2018, our major regional centers got involved in these projects. What is important? To expand the geographic span, it should be supported by the increased financial resources. So the level of citizens' involvement cannot be below 50% level. This is absolute minimum, but it would be better if it would be up to 70%. When citizens are personally involved and they are prepared to provide their inputs in ruble terms, they will be prepared to see the result. Then they will be confident, and then they will trust. Otherwise, they will not come to discuss next year the projects which have been proposed by somebody else. That's what matters to us. This is the most important point to us. After having gone through a democratic process while we were selecting the projects for the bigger cities in our region to the population of up to 500,000, when we asked the question, what would be better, to have one major project or several fewer ones? And we did a survey, and we understood that several smaller ones would be more useful, but still we correlated it with the size of the city and the population. If Stavropol is capable of implementing 5 projects of 6 million worth each, a smaller one would be limited to 2 million rubles only. I'm talking about the share of contribution from the regional budget to the project. What do they choose mostly? Mostly they are interested in the cultural objects, and the residents of cities are voting in favor of developing physical culture and the like. So we have implemented almost 600 projects, and out of those 174 were implemented this year only. Not going to comment on all of them, as it's just an illustration for you what we had before and what we have after the project implementation, as it was chosen by people, by the community. So we already started talking about money. Of course, the regional budget is involved, but as you see, so the input from the business and citizens at large in participation, financial participation, is growing in absolute terms and relative terms. 300 million was provided by the regional budget this year, but the total budget, if we had taken it from the budget, would be 510 million. 300 million out of this figure was provided from the CRY budget, and the balance was contributed by other participants in the process. What kind of advice could we give to our colleagues who are at the outset of the journey, or those who would like to review the experience available to date? I think it's impossible to take stock of the outcomes of the competition prior to the start of the budgetary year. That's what we do by means of putting it in law in order to understand how it should be implemented. And we have a tender process for contractors. So the contractors would be selected during the current year to make sure that as early as next year the project would start being implemented. What else is important? We have limited the deadline for the tender process up to or by the 1st of May. Why do we restrict it so? In order to make sure that the savings as we have accumulated as a result of this bidding process would be passed over to the next best project in line. So if we summarized everything in September, and we have 157 projects, so to date we have 174 just due to savings. We are not taking it back to the budget. We are just giving them away to the projects because they were waited for by people. And the as for the bar, which has to be overcome by the business of population, it is not actually set up. It should be even 1 ruble. Whatever you can, whatever you want, we are prepared and happy to take it. How do we maintain the interest, and how do we expand the geography? Training. We cannot live without it. The innovative things proposed by the World Bank when they were training our first municipalities involved in the projects, it was the first step. By now we have established our own school to promote local initiatives and train not just the heads of the administrations, but most importantly public organizations, territorial government or local governments, and we do it just by means of involving various groups on the internet. So we invite everyone, whoever is interested in it, just you're most welcome. And when we started an event, so we always asked who came here via the Vkontakte social media or other social media. It's important. So awareness campaign is also an important element to tell people about the program, to invite them to participate. You have already seen one of the videos. But in addition to that, we have another very useful program which is demonstrated weekly on the regional television on Mondays. And you can just turn on your TV and you could see like 2 days in a row everything about participatory budgeting only. That's how much we have accumulated. Interviews with people, with the initiatives, with business and the like. So in Andras, I fully agree with you. It was also quite interesting for us. When we say participatory budgeting, I think the most important in this notion is not the word budgeting, but participatory, because it's not a project about money. 300 million for Stavropol, what is it? It's 0.1% of the budget. That's it. Clearly, it's not about money. This is a project about people and for people. It's exactly why it was important for us to see how the social sentiment changes. And we ran a sociological survey independently during this year. How good it was, I'm not going to boast about it, but still we did it. And we identified that the ultimate satisfaction rate of the population has grown. Why do we refer to 2015? It was the year 2016, actually. We started to apply this practice more broadly. We have territories when the issue of the facilitation of the territory is not a challenge anymore. So these are the territories where these local initiatives projects have been implemented for more than a year by now, and definitely it is related to this initiative. It's not the only factor, but definitely without this factor, the result would not be that impressive. And taking into account the experience and the Russian practice in this regard, I think it's quite relevant to discuss maybe at the State Duma and the Federation Council level the issue of how to make use of the participatory budgeting mechanism in context of setting up the projects of comfort urban environment. There is a project which is implemented at the federal level, but it's too complex. It is actually surrounded by bureaucratic barriers. In order to enter it, it takes some insurmountable efforts. If we could merge these projects together, and if we were based on the participatory budgeting approach, I think the effect would be much more impressive. I don't think that I'm going to actually reveal a huge secret here. When the comfortable urban space initiative is implemented, of course there is an element of civil participation, but still it is proposed by local government. It's like when you come to McDonald's or when you come to a full-fledged restaurant. Everything would be rosy at McDonald's, but it will be limited to a limited number of products proposed. It's a good bit that Chubis doesn't hear you. It's not that I'm saying that it's bad. I'm just talking about the limited opportunities to choose. But when you come to a good restaurant, you will have a thick menu to make your pick. Or you can even propose something yourself. And in participatory budgeting, it's about offering something by yourself. And the comfortable urban environment is something about this limited choice factor. I think that if we just merge it into one project, it would be better for everyone. Organized local communities, as we believe, just because they are organized, as I've said, they're more active, proactive, and we are going to actually consult on this with our colleagues. Maybe we will update our methodology. Maybe we will add more scores to the points to it if it is an initiative proposed by an organized community, and we'll continue monitoring and holding under control after it has been proposed. I'm absolutely confident in longevity and usefulness of the local initiatives programs, just because this is about the idea which is needed by time. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. Clearly, you live for this idea to be implemented, and it's very encouraging to see people like you, who is a champion in the local initiative and participatory budgeting area. Now we are passing on to Sakhalin. moving to the east. And Sakhalin is a relatively young region for the participatory budgeting, but the pace they're moving on are quite impressive in terms of co-financing. I'm not revealing the figure, not to scare other regions, but still it's quite impressive. I think that the colleague will tell us, and Dana will tell us about that, and your approach is quite useful. And you refer to international experience, Portuguese model in particular. Your port program is quite exciting to hear about. Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I will talk about participatory budgeting practice and where it all began. It began in 2016, in October of 2016, where the Ministry of Finance held a workshop at the Finance Research Institute. We attended that workshop. Vladimir Vladimirovich Vagin was making a speech there, and we were really excited about it. So when we suggested to our governor that we launch this idea, he supported it vigorously, and our governor, Oleg Nikolaevich, is a very proactive governor. He's not the office-type governor. He travels a lot, extensively, and let me remind you, our region is the only island-based region, of which there are more than 100 islands. So he is a very proactive, hands-on governor, and he talks about the importance of listening to the people. We care about their opinions. We care about their concerns and their challenges. So in October of 2016, when Oleg Nikolaevich held a public hearing on the budget for the three-year period, he announced the year 2017 as the year to kick off participatory budgeting, and he identified two pilot areas, the city of Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk and Uglegorsk urban district. So this is where we all started. So when Mr. Horvai talked about the soccer pitch, this is about us. When we traveled across the villages, let me tell you that at first the people were quite averse to the idea. And at first, there was a very severe pushback from the people. They were even aggressive, saying, "What have you come here for?" And of course, later on, they apologized and they became a little more mellow. And at the end of the day, they even engaged in the process. And the old people there, well, you may recall the Soviet Union back in the 1970s. This was the village where most of the population are over 70 years old. And when we voted for this project, when they voted for the project, they voted unanimously. They voted unanimously in favor of the soccer pitch. So when we first began to tackle these projects, we came up with an idea. Let's launch the youth budget. The cost of a project is 3 million rubles. So we decided to pursue the youth budget as opposed to the school budget in order to let the kids talk, to listen to their vision, and to hear their ideas about the way forward. We are engaging 9 and school children from the 9th to 11th grades, and we are limiting the engagement of school children and principals because we had situations with very strong involvement from the school principals, because there was once an occasion when school children voted for the repair of school bathrooms, and we came there, we gathered the children, and of course there was no speaking about that project of fixing school bathrooms. But in the event, did you get them fixed? Yes, they got fixed, but that's a separate story. School children select various projects. For instance, one of the ideas was to build a ramp for disabled children. And they come up with different ideas. The city of Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk becomes ever more beautiful from year to year, but the whole city has tiles as pavement but the kids have rollerblades and they ride the bikes, and the only properly paved platform is around the building of the government. So from spring to fall, everybody uses that territory as a field for rollerblading. So we came up with the idea of building a dedicated platform for roller skating. I have a 13-year-old son, so when we first started implementing this project, and I asked him, I said, listen, if you had a chance to select between the projects, you would probably vote in favor of this platform for rollerblading. He looked at me and said, no, Mom, we really don't need it. Why don't you pave a road to one of the remote communities, remote villages? Because I have a friend living there. To tell you that I was stunned is an understatement. I was shocked. It completely turned around my perception of the kids. They have their way of looking at things. They're even more mature than we think. So this is the story behind the youth budget. While we were working on the youth budget, we came up with another idea. Because we are a fairly financially solid region, but until last year, you were a financially sound region. No, but of course, there are quite a few problems. But we thought, why don't we engage the citizens in construction projects? And this is where we ran into the following situation. If the participatory budgeting process is fairly common, besides we have taken on board international experience, the next question was, how do we implement it in earnest? Because in Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk is home to half of the population of the region. So how do we maintain a balance, making sure that people in the south and in the north of the Sakhalin, to make sure that we're on an even keel? And here's where I would like to thank Mr. Horvai, your team, because this is where we realized that we wouldn't be able to do it without the help of the World Bank. So what happened was that in September in Ufa, there was an international forum of the BRICS countries. So we attended that event, and we heard all the presentations and all the stories, and we thought that we would follow the Cascais example. The Portuguese example. Oh, it means you bought a bus? No. No, we designed it. We didn't buy it. We designed it. Oh, Anna Antolovna, you have 2 more minutes. If you could keep it short. Well, what can I tell you? We studied that model. We went to Portugal on a study tour, and we built our community space development project based on the Portuguese model, where the most important component is an open voting procedure. And the most important thing that we implemented in the course of project implementation, we will talk about the voting process in November. There will be an event hosted by the World Bank. But the most important thing was to make sure that the voting process was open and fair. So we launched this process through the Government Services portal. It required an online verification, and there is no way of cheating. This is a perfectly transparent way of voting. So once we did that, and even the media covered that. There was a TV show that covered this process. And what we found out were the words of gratitude. There was not even a word of doubt of foul play or unfair practices. And people overwhelmingly acknowledge the fact that they could talk to the local government and talk about their concerns in earnest. So this is these snapshots illustrate the elements of the information and awareness building campaign. This is a snapshot from our June 12th award ceremony. Each project is worth up to 100 million rubles, and there's 1 billion rubles dedicated and earmarked in our budget to finance them. So there are important components. You have to care about these projects. You have to have a solid team of like-minded people, and third, a component is political will. Thank you very much, Anna Anatolievna. Indeed, let's give a round of applause to Anna. Well, clearly, you have a very strong and young team. I wonder whether the LISP project is being implemented in the new offshore territory. But let's move on to the next speaker, Juan Pablo Guerrero, who is the director of GIFT, Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. And colleagues, participatory budgeting talks about initiatives, and of course there's a financial component which is a critical element of this endeavor. And of course this is a way of allocating and disbursing financial resources in a transparent manner and effectively. So this is what Juan Pablo will talk about. So the next question is participatory budgeting and its place in international standards. So the question that the Russian delegation wanted to pose is why participatory budgeting is a question that is at the top of the federal agenda. But for some reason, the LISP project is not properly accounted for, not properly captured. So these are the questions that we would like to present.
I'm going to speak English, so be ready. And I would like to have the control for the presentation, or someone's going to help me. Thank you. I am honored to be part of the 2018 Fiscal Forum. I would like to thank the Deputy Minister, Mr. Lavrov, of the Ministry of Finance of the Russian Federation, as well as the Moscow city government for the invitation. My gratitude goes especially to Anna Belenchuk, a transparency champion, and to the colleagues of the World Bank office in Russia. Public participation, go for it, please.
Не скупитесь на благодарности, да?
Public participation in budgeting is at the core of our work at GIFT, and the occasion of this forum could not be more timely, as GIFT expands its understanding about the importance of participation in fiscal policies. It is great to know that Russia has advanced strongly the development of participatory budgeting. I was yesterday at a workshop on the subject. The power of participation to make changes is amazing in this country and is having already positive implications in the relationship between authorities and the people. We have a lot to learn about your experience. As the Fiscal Forum is devoted to the strategic objectives of Russia, I believe strongly that transparency and participation will be, for a long time, at the center of your discussions. Why is the role of civil society in the budget process so important today, when traditionally it has not been so? Why are the international standards mainly looking at the central level of government and taking less into account increasing citizen engagement at the local level? Well, although local participatory experiences are to be praised, encouraged, and replicated, it does not mean that similar efforts can be neglected at the federal level. a better use of public resources is much needed there too at the national level. Now, national public representation is ensured in the legislative body, which plays an important constitutional role in most of countries in the budget process. But citizens' involvement in public financial management can be broader and more direct at critical stages of the budget cycle. Why? Budget decisions have significant impact in the life of taxpayers. 2, participation in the budget can improve fiscal responsibility. Providing direct feedback from the citizens, participation also helps decision makers to assess the likely effect of their actions. And one step forward, citizens can play a watchdog role in the budget process, preventing misuse of public funds. International initiatives, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, guide global public policy towards long-term challenges. Several of the SDGs will not be reached without direct involvement of the people. To name a few, reducing poverty, promoting gender equality, reducing income inequality, and developing inclusive institutions. Finally, if information technology has changed the way we connect to the world, they are also changing the relationship between public authorities and the taxpayer. For all these reasons, there has been a growing international consensus on the involvement of citizens in public finance. All global norms include today this dimension. Here we have a list of the most relevant ones. The GIFT High-Level Principles of Fiscal Transparency, endorsed by the UN Assembly General, set the ground in 2012. Members of the network, such as the IMF, the World Bank, OECD, Open Contracting Partnership, have discussed within the network and produced new versions of the standards. They all find a strategic role for civic engagement. For someone my generation, I know you are all very young, to see the IMF being very concerned about the citizen itself is quite a change. And there is also initiatives aiming at practice, led by the Russian Ministry of Finance at the World Bank and the World Bank. The PEMPAL network, and some of my colleagues are here present, has developed in 2017 a rigorous background paper about participation in the budget process, and they're engaging in putting it into practice. A central input for this effort has been the GIFT principles for participation in fiscal policies, which provide a conceptual framework and examples for any initiative on the matter. They were developed after 2 years of consultations that included governments, experts, civil society organizations around the world, and international financial institutions. I see that there is a dialogue, a discussion in Russia about framing legally citizen participation. This could help, but it shouldn't be a bureaucratic exercise, but an exercise that guarantees the right to citizens to participate. It would be more oriented to rights than to procedures control. The key elements of the GIFT principles include making sure that the public is, one, well informed, ensuring clarity on the rules of engagement of the citizens, making efforts to reach out to marginalized communities, and 4, making sure that the civic engagement is meaningful, which implies getting feedback and institutionalize an ongoing and fair dialogue. Many of the experiences I have heard about in the last 2 days address these issues correctly. But this is not only a normative discussion or exercise. Civic engagement is already taking place at the national level in budget formulation, in execution, in monitoring, in infrastructure investments, tax collection, control on corruptions, and service delivery. It is not a substitute for existing institutions, but rather a complement to help them to better do their work. Let us look at some evidence. The 2017 Open Budget Survey measures only participation at the national level. According to the IBP, 94 countries out of 115 considered have some form or participatory mechanism in place. On the one side, IBP finds that most countries are not making enough effort to systematically engage with citizens, which explains that the OBS score is quite low in public participation, only 12 points out of 100 at the global level. But on the positive side, the OBS of IBP reveals that governments at the national level are already using mechanisms for public to provide input to the budget cycle. For instance, in the preparation phase, countries such as Ukraine, Malawi, India, South Africa, Tanzania, and others have pre-budget hearings and consultations with the Ministry of Finance. Elected representatives from civil society review policies and draft bills that feed into the budget in public councils in the Kyrgyz Republic, Kazakhstan, Croatia, Bulgaria, Japan, Brazil, and others. Bottom-up consultations approaches emerge at the local level to provide specific budget proposals to the national ministries of finance in the Philippines, Indonesia, and Botswana. We have also documented several examples of participation in the approval phase of the budget cycle. One example is Croatia, where public discussions take place after the budget has been tabled in Parliament and before it is approved. Then citizens are allowed to share their conclusions with the Legislative Budget Committee. And Peru, for instance, has a similar system where it takes place online. On the execution phase of the cycle, many more practices are found. Online complaint and feedback mechanisms have been established in Indonesia, South Korea, New Zealand, Malaysia, and many others. There are also examples of engagement the mechanisms that resemble participatory budgeting, as the examples we witnessed today. In Mexico, for example, a program financed by the federal government seeks to improve the infrastructure of vulnerable rural schools very far away from Mexico City. It ensures a decisive saying of teachers, professors, and directors of the school in the use of the funds and the allocations of the funds. And they have a feedback mechanism from the local rural school to the Ministry of Finance in Mexico. And on audit and oversight, the last phase of the cycle, there are also inspiring stories. IBP finds that in most countries in Latin America, the Supreme Audit Institution engaged the public on setting their work program. And more recently, and next door, the State Audit Office in Georgia has created an analytical web platform with comprehensive information, including interactive and user-friendly tools. So it is happening at national level in great number of countries. It is true that these are specific projects with rather limited goals, but the efforts to inform the public and reach out to civic engagement is already there. What makes these mechanisms work? Andreas was talking about what's the evidence. According to experts, and I'm very glad to have many of them here, we can identify some basic elements for them to be able to perform and to last, to endure. First, there is a need of strong government support, the champions that we talked about, including advocacy champions or pushers of the initiatives and capacity building on government and civil society. You are aware of that in your experience at the local level. Two, programs need significant resource investment to have an impact. It needs to be taken very seriously. And three, the presence of a strong organized civil society is critical. Public participation works best when civil society organizations work with officials in providing information, mobilizing citizens, work to ensure implementation, and providing technical assistance. Now, what do we mean when we talk about impact? And I am so glad that some of these examples have already mentioned, not only in your particular experience, but also in the study made by the World Bank in the case of Russia. The evidence documented shows that transparency and participation produce a better allocation of resources and provision of some public services. They improve thanks to monitoring and feedback provision. Transparency and citizen engagement also improve the quality of the response of the preferences of the beneficiaries of the services. They open the opportunity for marginalized groups to exert some influence in decisions that affect them. And they can have a positive outcome in development policies such as education, health. As importantly, they increase trust and citizen compliance of existing rules and tax return. We want better citizens, let's inform them and let's have them engage. I acknowledge that we still have a lot to learn about these experiences. And I am aware that there are other good ways to obtain efficiency and effectiveness in the use of public resources and to obtain trust from the public. But if we consider the long run, and we take into account the challenges of budget sustainability, the need to address future liabilities, such as pensions, and to mobilize domestic resources, it seems that transparency and participation at the national level are impossible to ignore. Thank you very much.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guerrero, for in-depth exposure to international practice. Now we're getting to the next stage. We're talking about the experience accumulated by the International Observatory on Participatory Democracy, which unites more than 800 cities and think tanks and educational institutions. They have been working during 15 years in providing education and training programs. And of course, many are aware of this project due to their well-known project for a participatory project. So we are passing it over to Andrea Duarte, who is the coordinator of the organization in Russia and in other countries. Please, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I also will do in English my presentation. So I firstly also want to thank to the organizers for the kindness invitation, and also, of course, to the team of the World Bank for all the kindness and help in the mobilization and for your work. So yeah, I want to introduce the work of the International Observatory in Participatory Democracy, the IOPD. Yes, that's it. So basically, the IOPD, it's a network of, as the moderator told, as of local and regional governments. So basically, we're working in the local level, but we also want to work in this, like in the scaling. So also the relation being with different levels of governments. But we basically, our members are from local and regional governments. We also have this. We also are very interested in the civil society part, no, in the activation of the participation. So we also work with like other networks or organizations, with civil society organization based in the territory, and think tanks or research centers. Because I think we find that it's very interesting to exchange this point of view from the government and also from the civil society, the different point of view in the process of engagement. The network was born in a European EU project of cooperation between Latin America, a Urbal project. So it was started with a cooperation project in which different cities around the world, they're doing exchange on creating like small observatories to evaluate the policies in engagement in the different cities. So it was born like that, and finally it transforms in a network, no? So because of this beginning, it's true that we have a lot of members in Latin America, in South Europe, but we're also growing a lot in Russia in this moment with the thing of World Bank. So we have different members in Russia. And this year in the award we had two applies from Russia, one from St. Petersburg and the other from Yakutia. And basically, yeah, we want to be this big network of reference of experience in participatory democracy, so all the ways that citizens can engage, like in public policies, in the design, in the implementation, of course, evaluation of public policies on the world, and trying to improve democracy, because, of course, there's different problems now with, for example, in Europe with democracy, so we're trying to fight for a better democracy that citizens can regain trust in policy, in politics, and it's a big challenge for us, this problem. So we're trying to, through the citizen participation, to regain the population and citizens in our democracies. Basically, the activities we do in the IOPD, we organize annually, yearly conference, which is like the big moment to put together like local governments, researchers, activists, and different actors. It's a big moment of exchange. Each year, it is a big thematic issue. Last year was the conference was held in Montreal, in Canada, and it was around the inclusion, participation without inclusion, because for us it's very important to think when we are designing the participation policies, the PV examples, for example, it's very important to think in the inclusion, because if we're doing like just the classic ways, we can maybe forbid a lot of people, a lot of groups in our societies are not the similar, so it's important to work in the inclusion. And this year the conference will be held in my city, in Barcelona, so I invite all of you to come to Barcelona. It will be from 25 to 27 November. And the big issues of this year will be like direct democracy, citizen initiative, how the way of citizens can like push governments to like drive different initiatives or policies, and also all this linked in we call about ecosystem of inclusive ecosystem of participation. It's about how we think the participation, not in like different channels, but with real in a system of participation. How we see all the system of governance of our cities, including the participation of people. We also organize, we recognize an award yearly. It's to recognize best practice in citizen participation. I will talk a little more later. We also have working groups. It's the way that the members working in like one item that they think it's very more important for them. For example, we had in the past one working group on youth participatory budgeting, because it's different cities, true that it's some cases that were told before. It's so interesting. So some cities want to learn more in this item, and other different things that cities want to like work more in deepness. We also like participate in other activities, organize seminars or exchange moments that I think is very important. I also have to mention that the IOPD, we are working with UCLG. UCLG is United Cities and Local Governments. It's the main network of local governments associations. So for us, it's very important also to advocate, like inside UCLG, that it's very important all the governance and the participation items, because sometimes it's true that, of course, we have like big items about housing, about planning, like sustainable issues that, of course, are very, very important. But we also try to push in that the participation is very important to define all the public policies. And finally, also in our website, we collect like different experiences, and like we have case of study, we have publications and articles. So I also invite you to visit our website. It's OIDP. It's in Spanish and French the letters .net. So yeah, I will go in with the award that they asked me to talk about. The award of best practice in citizen participation. This is the picture of last year in Montreal that we award this distinction to the city of La Paz in Bolivia for a program that's called Neighborhood and Communities of the Truth. It's kind of a PV program. It's like a program for development of like informal neighborhood and areas in the city, and it's also doing with like a lot of participation. And it's very important also to like not only like the decision of building infrastructure, that of course is very important, but also all the community engagement and the community construction in this process, like to create communities and to help to better livable in this neighborhood. So this year, I will tell you a little bit about the award. We changed a little bit this year. We introduced a step of like evaluation about in the members. So basically, how it works: each city or region that has innovative practice in citizen participation can apply for this award. So they don't. They just have to put in a platform that it's participateoidp.net. I think it's participateoidp. And this platform is based in Decidim Barcelona, who is the participation platform of the city of Barcelona. It's an open source platform, and it's useful to for each other city organization who wants to have a free source platform to make participatory processes or decision process. For us, it was very useful to have to improving this platform. So the cities apply there a small summary of the experience. And in this first evaluation step, all the members who are singing in the website, they can evaluate the different candidacies. So for us, it was very interesting to introduce this type of participatory evaluation, because it's the moment when all the members can read for the different experiences, can find information. They ask questions to the cities who are applying, and they have the answer. So for us, it was very interesting to introduce this kind of dynamic evaluation. I think it's very important, because sometimes in the past edition we only send finally the summary of all the cases, but I'm sure that not the cities are reading all the information. So it's a kind of way to involve the members and also to share the information. So after this first evaluation step with the members, each member they can make comments, and they can vote for 3 candidacies. And the 20th we had more than 60 candidacies, and the 20th more vote passed to the next step. And it's the step that we are now, that an international jury is evaluating these finalist candidacies. So we're combining the participatory evaluation with a jury. No? We want to have the both parts of the evaluation. And finally, the winner will be discovered during the conference next November. So when City will be the winner of the award, and we make a publication with all the experience. This is the list of the winners of the last year. So the award started in 2006. So this year is the 22nd edition. The 12th edition. And well, as you can see, most of the winners are PB experiences, not only, but lots of them. For example, last year, as I told you, La Paz, it's not really a participatory budgeting experience, but it's kind of. We had in 2016 Canoas in Brazil, that the award was for the full system of participation, but one of the more important issues of this system was the participatory budgeting too. Or in 2015, we have the Chengdu experience, that was a very important participatory budgeting experience with the rural areas, so it's very important that. And well, in the website, if you have more interest, there's all the information of the award. Finally, we want to try to recognize innovative experience and how we can learn all each other about this experience. They told me they asked me to talk about some cases of this year. I will just really a few comments of 4 different cases. I will start with the participatory budgeting for migrant workers in Taiwan. It's really a very, very interesting experience. In this case, it's a participatory budget focused only in a specific group of people. In this case, foreign workers who are living in Taiwan, but they live there, but they're not. Maybe a lot of them don't speak Chinese. So they're people that really live separate with the rest of the population. They are only there for the work. And the government of this municipality think that, okay, we have this population here. There's some conflicts, there's some problem with the local population and this foreign population. So how to think about a way to try to connect these people, to feel that more comfortable. So the experience, it's not a big PB, it's not a lot of money, but it's more interest, how the way to think a way to using participation, to thinking more in solve social problems and problem of conviviality. And I think it's one of the most interesting initiatives we have this year. Last year we had another from Taiwan, from New Taipei, that it was kind of focusing a group, in this case of disability people. So it's it was very also like different one, no? Because usually participatory budgeting are focused of the general population, and this one are really focused in specific groups with some problems, and it's in this case of the migrant workers, the PBs, all the materials, all the meetings are made in the language of these people, not in Chinese, so it's really thought and designed to be like an integrated way to do this experience, no? And maybe it could be an example for other cities or other situations that thinking in a participatory budgeting in a way to include people or to think to solve different problems. Another case, the case of Cascais, when it was referred before, there's different case, but I think the YAF participatory budgeting is very, very, very interesting as well as you are using this inspiration, no? The case, I think it was presented, I think it's also very interesting, the thing of also for school or in general for YAF, I think it's very interesting to think in these tools to engage people since they're young and it's also a big problem, no? How a lot of government think about how we can make YAF people interested in politics and policies, because it's true that sometimes the turnout of YAF is lower and we have problems of that, no? So, and maybe it could be interesting way to really involve YAF people since the young age, no? In the civic problems of the city, and to think also public policies with thinking in the YAF people. Another example that I would just want to mention about, it's in Malaysia, in Penang, it's a participatory budgeted with the gender approach. It's had the three examples as examples of how we're using PB, thinking in an inclusive way, or we can use this tool in specific groups, or thinking about different issues. No, we have problem of gender inequalities, how maybe public policies are not so thinking in the woman's perspective. So it's very interesting. Also, this case, there are more cases in other countries, but in the Penang case, it's very interesting because it has a long path, so it has a story, it has evolved, and I think it's very interesting. If you're really interested, I think you can find more information in this case. It's quite interesting. I put also the participatory budgeting in Rennes, France, because it was all the way they doing about the work with an independent lab who is doing it's like an independent lab of the city council who's doing the process. I think I don't have too much time to develop that, but I think it's, interesting also how we design the PB process. No? We have examples, for example, that they're using, for example, students to make the facilitator of the process, or thinking different ways really to design the process. No? And don't be afraid to be innovative and think in different ways and trying things, and if it doesn't work, we can improve and change again. So yeah, I think it's very important not to be afraid and to innovate. And yeah, to end of that, they asked me about the criteria of evaluation PB practices. And yeah, some of my colleagues was telling about before, participatory budgeted have really two different dimensions, no? The participatory, the participation, how the people is engaging, is participating, and the other dimension is the budgetary one, no? It's all the financial issue. Of course, the interesting thing of PB is to manage both dimensions and work together. But I think it's interesting where we're thinking the evaluation, we have to think in both dimensions to think really about how we design this evaluation, no? In the IOPD, it's true that we're working more in the first dimension, like in the participatory one, in the policy, in the politic thing, no? It's how we are more interested in the democratic one, how the people are involving in the public affairs, but of course the budgetary issue is very important one, and we have to evaluate both, no? And one of the criteria maybe we can take count for the in the participation, we can count, I don't know, the meetings we had, the debates, the vote. We also can make citizen surveys to evaluate the satisfaction of the users, or thinking about different ways to have the indicators, no? In the budgetary moment, we can count exactly the percentage of budget we allocate for the PB, the accomplishment of the project that I approved in the participation. It's very important that, no? If we make a participatory budgeting, the people vote for proposals, but that they're not like being made in practice, it's not very fair for the people. And maybe the last year we don't have a lot of participation. No? It's very important to really like implement all the policies that I approved, all the projects approved by the citizen. And of course, it's very important to think about the impacts, no? Impacts on public policies that I think we listened about also before, no? How this project impact on public policy, better the health, it's better the conviviality of people, that we have to think a lot in indicator of impacts in public policies, and also it's very important to think about impacts in the actors, no? For example, how the government changed the way to work if we introduce the participatory budgeting, how the civil servants, maybe they change the way to introduce the administrative things, how we change the participatory like process with the PB. No? It's very important to evaluate all this change in the actors, in the civil servants, in the administration, and also maybe in the citizens. No, thinking about the behavior of citizens with the administration in relation before and after the participatory budgeting application.
Господин Дуарте, но мы вынуждены вас уже...
Mr. Duarte, you're out of time.
Времени.
Okay. So just like, the last really remark. No, just to I wasn't really finished. About PB is really, I think, a very interesting tool. We have to improve that. We have to work on that. But we also have to think that we are more tools to working in participation. We have different ways to involve the citizen. And I think it's very important to think. Yesterday we were talking about in the seminar about the regulation. It's very important to have. I think the regulation issue. I think it's very important, not to be so complicated, so bureaucratic, but to have a clear regulation. To think about the inclusion and the evaluation, and that's all my intervention. And really thank you for your attention. And I also invite you in Barcelona next November, as I told you. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. Хорошее завершение. Увидимся в Барселоне. Мы не против.
Yes, that's a good way to round off the speech. See you in Barcelona. Yes, the Republic of Saha will host the next event, and hopefully we will win. Now, colleagues, let's move on to the next speaker. I would like to give the floor to our expert, Yves Caban. He's truly an internationally renowned expert for his work in Porto Alegre, and especially for those of you who joined the event in UFA, Yves presented his case there. Today, he is the Professor Emeritus for Development Planning at the University College of London. Yves, the floor is yours. If you could keep it concise, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very pleased to be here again. Third time in 1 year. Fantastic opportunity. You've been very warm, and that's why I'm pleased to be here. Thank you to the organizers as well. I mean, joining people, it's not easy. Thanks for the organization. I was invited, actually, to take two main questions. What are the trends in the future? And this is like prediction. And a second is, what kind of cooperation could we have? How could we pursue our exchange? I will touch on 9 points which I see like existing trends and expand on them. The first one is that PB probably will continue spreading to new countries. And I think that Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, who have not yet in with the presence of Russia, may be a next frontier for PB. The second is that I see that there will be upscaling in different countries. And I hope that Russia will continue to upscale. There is room with the resources you have with the other territories. And the trend that is existing today, which is high concentration on a very limited selected league of countries with high concentration. Here you see the picture of Russia already in this league, Poland, I could name Peru, where you have 2,200 territories which are involved, Cameroon in Africa, this probably will continue as well. My second trend, and this is relatively recent, is that you have more and more complicated cities like metropolis, capital cities, and federal districts, which are today entering very significantly into PB. You see here this image of Paris. The change, you can see it. And I see here, like in cities like Madrid, Quito, Seoul, Paris, Yaoundé, Lisbon, New York, Bogota, Mexico, and I continue naming them, adding obviously St. Petersburg, I mean, your federal district, which is there. And I see three things here. One, high capacity of democratic and social innovation. They are a frontier for innovation. Number two, they have strong leaderships from their mayors. When you go to Paris or to Seoul, these guys, despite all their problems, are doing very well. And in some cases, too few of them, you have significant resources. Paris, for instance, is putting 100 million euros. It's like 7 billion rubles. Same with Madrid. These are good examples for us to reflect upon. My third tendency is the following. Even if still the municipal scale is the main scale, where you have local government, where you have PB, you have the two tendencies. One, at district level, you have plenty of new things happening. It can be in parishes, it can be in wards, it can be in districts. I was mentioning St. Petersburg, but innovation comes below. This is very promising, close to people. And the other one is an uplift, I would say, with PB taking place in metropolitan scale. You were mentioning Chengdu with its 20 million inhabitants. This is big, you know, on metropolitan region. In provinces, you have the list here, but it's in France, it's in Mexico, in Chile. I mean, you are specialized on that, I would say, in Russia with the work you did at regional level, and we heard two cases in the provinces of Peru. Interestingly, nations, central government are there, and I think that this will be a very strong tendency over the last 30 years. Today you have Portugal with an experimental program, Korea, much more significant. There are debates in Brazil to have a PB to face the crises they are facing today, to have a national PB as a tool to fight, to struggle against currency, against corruption. A fourth trend is what I call the overflow or spillover. If you look at the tendency over the last 15, 20 years, you see hundreds of experiences beyond the governmental sphere. It's not only with public money. Transport agencies, for instance, in Paris again. Community housing in Toronto. The images that you have here are in what was impenetrable housing schemes. You mentioned them in Penang, where people, very poor, started to have a PB with gender approach, and they chose to say, we want to be dignified. Let's paint our walls and start a new life. This will continue. There's plenty of things happening. Social enterprises, universities, more and more. We spoke about schools. So this will continue to go beyond the sphere. My fifth trend is that still basic services, small equipment at neighborhood level will continue probably to be eligible. But what I see is a tendency to have PB as a tool for local economic development. Money to generate jobs, money to strengthen co-ops, money to create wealth. I'm in Seville, 50% unemployed. Poor people with their sons in their homes, and now they are transforming parks into urban agriculture places generating wealth. You have that happening in China, you have that happening in Cameroon, I mean, to take my same cities. It was happening at the beginning in Porto Alegre, and it has been a little bit lost in the way. I think that this will be very strong in the future. The sixth trend is, we saw PB, I remember at the beginning, 30 years ago, as a tool to improve the life of the people. And then you have a new tendency, which is, let's transform people to transform their cities. And then the focus is on training, in empowering people in order for them to take the leadership. And so PB appears as a pretext for pedagogy, for changing the way citizens are engaged, are committed. So PB is an end, improving people's lives still, but at the same time it's a means, empower people to be more powerful, to be more engaged citizens. The seventh, we spoke a lot of it, is that if you look historically, PB is basically either on sectors, for instance, housing PB. There is money on one sector, or one or two or three sectors. Environment, it can be transport. And another one is that it happens in neighborhoods, then in districts, then in the city as a whole. We call them territorial PB. What has been very limited are the PB with earmarked money, specific money for disadvantaged groups. Migrants, you name Taoyuan in Taipei, but it's the same for the youth, for the kids, for the unemployed, for the migrants, for the elderly in aging situations. This has been totally very thin. And you mentioned youth, and I remember 20 years ago, we started the first one in Barra Mansa in Brazil, and I was happy to be part of it. The image on the top are from migrant workers from Taoyuan that you mentioned, and the other one is from Valongo in Portugal. It could have been hundreds of them. And it's very moving. I invite you to be part of this movement in Russia. To really have in each city, like you did in Sakhalin, I'm so pleased to hear what you said. The way you were moved, I was moved the same. I never stopped. It kept me young, despite my age. And so it will keep you young as well, because they are adult. They have a creativity that we have lost. And they are so in solidarity. They do things that we never thought of. And then we say, we see our kids differently. It's very good for society. So let's move into that. I think that it will be a major way to run cities. And the youth, they will never be the same. They are different politicians. The women and the kids, I follow them now that 20 years later, they are not the same. A different breed. Very interesting. So thank you to have started that. What I see, if you look at that very simple, there's a paper on that, you have basically three underpinning logic. One was Porto Alegre at the beginning. Workers' Party, let's change the society, power to the people. Workers' Party approach. PB is a tool to get the left on power. And I remember at the beginning they were saying our model were the Soviets. You can see how far it was, the Soviet from Leningrad, etc. You have still this. It will be there, but very spotted. A second tendency, which is the major one, is good governance. Having multi-stakeholders approach, having citizens closer to their local government, and local government closer to their citizens to improve the way we manage cities. This is becoming the dominant model, and I think that it will be the same over the next years. This is very strong, and it's keeping strong. It's not bad. The third one is very technocratic, very much on the new school on management, where you see citizens are clients to improve public money. And I'm happy that the Ministry of Finance in Russia is so open to good governance. Usually when you have a Ministry of Finance just want to optimize their resources, full stop, but no other involvement. Very pleased to hear that. And this technocratic logic usually doesn't last. These cases end up very quickly once you have a new mayor or a new financial. So don't choose this one, the technocratic way. It doesn't work. Now, this is a very serious case. What I see is what I would call a bad tendency. When we started 30 years ago, the amount of money, when I divide it up by the number of people in the city, was around $100 per inhabitant per year. Very heavy numbers of resources. And now, through the years, I saw more and more PB with less and less money. And this is preoccupying if you want to seriously engage with people, because if you don't have money enough, people, after a couple of years, they just say, hey, 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 where is my street now? Where is the improvement for my kids? So you see, you have a polarization here. And I'm so glad that in Russia, Sakhalin is entering in what I call the 100 Club. The 100 Club is the club where you have $100 per inhabitant per year, which are discussing and decided by people. So Sakhalin, very good. You have other cities, few, but they are leading us the way. So my main issue is, let's try to move from, the below $5 per inhabitant per year, which is or one or even less, to gradually putting more money. People are prepared, and it's better for the city. You will mobilize more resources. But let's not forget, even if I agree, PB is also, it's about people, but it's about money, public money as well. So this is a dilemma. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, the second question was, would it be possible for a team of Russian practitioners from the region to receive support from the community? And my answer is absolutely yes. And I see the following fields for promising activities. The first would be to have international Russian specialized PB modules for training, based on your experience, based on our experience. But specialized. Could be online, could be face-to-face. And I would encourage to have training for trainers, multipliers, people. This is lacking. We tested that in Latin America, it worked well, but it has been. The second is technical assistance, but basically on innovations, on new ideas. Because quickly you have your ways to do things. But to inject new innovation is always very good. So let's focus on that. Money is limited. Monitoring and evaluation, internal, external, on methods and tools practically. Joint research programs, for instance on impact. And strategic thinking, reducing vulnerability of experiences. How are you going to keep the flame burning? It's not easy. 20% of the cases of PB are dying after a couple of years. And Nelson Diaz from Portugal will tell us his number about Portugal. They do not last. How do you reduce vulnerability? It's a serious thing. How to scale up? Strategic thinking. What is the long-term institutional anchorage for a PB? Not easy, but it's a strategic reflection. If you put it on finance, it will have a style. If you put it on social protection, it will have another style. If you put it on planning, it will have another style. What is the best? Strategic thinking. Is there a common ground for future cooperation? My answer, again, absolutely yes. And it's already taking place. If you look at these two books and paper, one published thanks also to OEDP, you will see that Stavropol and St. Petersburg are part of what I call these pioneers of PB in Russia, and now we have new pioneers in Russia as well. And the other one is the book that Nelson Diaz, jointly with the friends from the World Bank, having put it together. You have plenty of text from many of us here. It's good. What I think is on that is that what you're doing is the right thing. Let's meet regularly, because face-to-face, friendship, personal bonds is the best way to engage for cooperation. You don't do that for money. I mean, some do, but if you are really engaged in PB, you do it because you like what but what is being done. So face-to-face is there, and I think that co-production of knowledge is important. My last slide is a question that you ask. Is there common ground for future cooperation? I'll continue. Next one? It's me? No, I was calling myself. But I heard. Well, what would be the objective? To me, it's mutual. I'm too much of a professor to say what is enriching is mutual learning. It's not I teach you, no. It's we have to continue the mutual learning exercise and to build a community of practice that will involve as much as possible Russian colleagues. It's a peer-to-peer perspective, and you are a source of innovation, and I can say and state that we are very interested to know your innovations, document them, tell us what you do, tell us your stories. You do not do that enough. That's my big observation. University don't do that enough. Tell us your stories. What I heard this morning is fascinating. Who knows it? We need this peer-to-peer. We lost thousands of innovations all through these 30 years. We need to document. Please try to do it. These exchanges, I think they have to be based on resourceful cities. Stavropol, Ufa, Sakhalin, Yakutia. These are the places it has to be rooted there, and it has to be rooted in multi-actors. It's not enough to have only government. It's about the people involved, the universities, the private sectors, all those who are contributing. So this is difficult to achieve, and I think that is a challenge. I see, to finish with, some challenges for strengthening our exchanges and mutual support. One is that what I saw, I mean, in the last 40 years of doing international sort of cooperation, is we need to share common values. If you don't share common values, you don't go far. It transforms into a job or into money. You do it for service, but you don't trust. It doesn't last. And this is common values such as participatory democracy, social and spatial justice, inclusion of disadvantaged groups. Are you moved by the poverty, by the homelessness, by the aging population? We need to share that to really build a good cooperation. And probably, and this is again an invitation to you as Russians and my new friends, I would say, is we need to know more about what are your values? What do you trust? We don't know. What comes out of Russia is very limited. We need resources. This is a challenge. I mean, the World Bank has been helping out, but it's not at the scale of what we should do. Going beyond the language barrier, Russia, Korea, these are the source of innovation. How are we going to do that? I think that we should invest more in translating beyond Google and DeepL. We need long-term political support. That's why this is a challenge. It goes ups and downs. You see Porto Alegre, it died out. You see Brazil, it's full crisis. So how are we going to go beyond this? And that would be at the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Dear friends, we are abusing our time limit. I do not know how to interrupt. First of all, I'm not completely fluent in English. And secondly, people have come from far away, so I don't dare to stop them. So I dare to stop only a colleague of mine from Sakhalin. So we'd like to thank you for your experience and for your presentations and inputs based on the BRICS summit in Ufa. I remember us proposing to set up an expert council. So if you could lead it, head it, it would be wonderful. You missed my point, but I would repeat it for you after the meeting. So I think that don't need to introduce to you Mr. Lavrov, who is going to be our next speaker. In addition to a whole scope of issues to handle, such as procurement and methodology, he is also involved in the participatory budgeting, and we are very thankful to you for that, for your handling this issue. I probably would like to hear about what is ahead of us, but pertaining to legislation in particular, budget code, and there were some amendments introduced. What else? What about the formalities which would support our pace forward? Dear colleagues, with your permission, I'm not going to actually demonstrate to you the presentation. We'd rather place it on the website with some bullet points and comments. I'd rather try to formulate and answer 3 questions. Where are we now, where we would like to come, and what should be done for arriving at where we want. So you already referred to very impressive figures regarding developments on the front of participatory budgeting. Indeed, since 2015, we actually every year double the scope in terms of the number of regions and projects and financing. Of course, we will unlikely get a similar leap forward in this year unless we have another Sakhalin on the board. So as for the number of projects, I'm sure that Sakhalin will add 2-fold growth again. But as for the number of subjects, it's unlikely, I should tell you. The question is, why does it happen? The answer is as follows, as I believe. Thanks to Minfin and World Bank project on promoting participatory budgeting. We had a wonderful pilot project in 7 regions where we supported local initiatives. The technologies were tested and they were prepared to roll out. There should have been some push made forward. I'd like to thank Andrus and his team for pushing us forward. And we have an explosive mode of growing on the front of the best practice. The question is, are there quality changes following these quantity challenges? Since we do not provide anything for the satisfaction rate, so I believe that it's good, because it's unlikely that people would continue doing it unless they liked it. So it actually brings us to the next point. We're expanding the scope of practice in the area of participatory budgeting. We even made some calculations. We started with 20 technologies or techniques. Now we have 110. If people wanted actually to show off and just to pretend that it was that, they would use 1 or 2 and they would limit themselves to it. But everybody is trying to be more creative about it. They just add more and more. It means that it's not a formal process at all. Of course, we try to measure quality of these techniques and projects, and we will continue doing it. By our estimates, indeed, we observe some systemic improvements. The question is, where are we going to? What we want to achieve? At least we don't want to lose what we have gained, because after the first explosion of enthusiasm, everybody is involved in this fashionable thing, which is called budgeting, and in practice everybody is excited, everybody involved, everybody exchanges views and opinions at fora, and so on. So that's great, but then everybody is oversaturated, it gets bored, and this just comes to a halt. So we need to make sure that it wouldn't happen. So the best way to do or to resolve the issue of import substitution, you'd rather start importing. So I think that we have to, at least as a quality challenge, to become a source of the best practice. What countries are we moving at? Let's start with the countries of Euro-Asian Economic Cooperation countries. We have a number of collective bodies which we could make use of, and I think this is a geographic region which we would be focused on. Then the former Soviet Union countries, I think they will be prepared to accept this practice and to take Russia as a source which is close to their mindset and whose practice might be relevant to that. And we are not stopping at that, so we are prepared to exchange with any countries. What is the advantage about the Russian Federation? Nobody will be ahead of us in terms of the variety of techniques and practices. We have 51 regions. There is no country in the world where would be a similar number of regions for a start. It means that definitely nobody will beat us on this side in terms of the variety of geographic conditions and budget supply. It's difficult to imagine there is another country like that. So the variety is our advantage. So we are prepared to actually share our experience with any countries and contemplate why does it happen this or that depending on the conditions. What is behind that? Is it just because preferences of the population or some activities carried out by the government, or maybe there are some objective differences which are becoming more and more salient since we are operating in the same legislative framework. Let's just start with that. I think that from this perspective, Russia might become a valuable source of information. This is kind of externality. Of course, there will be projects like this. I'm sure that this is a very good direction to move forward to improve effectiveness of budget expenditures. We do not impose any projects on anyone. We need to hear the voice of the public. What is of interest to them? What are they concerned about? Efficiency and effectiveness of budget expenditures. But of course, it cannot cover too broad range of budgetary expenditures, but it might make a very serious impact on improving the quality of budgeting process in general, and especially if people understand how to implement a particular project, they will definitely not allow actually to play around with other budgetary means, and it will give grounds for growing relevant financing and experts, which would be just making an impact on the governance and eventually on the federal level as well. And future governors, I'm sure, and even the future president of the Russian Federation should be actively involved in one of the youth projects, maybe not even 2 youth projects, because this is just life. Everybody is interested in it. And in addition to new local investment projects popping up, appearance and expansion and dissemination of new people, new tradition, new techniques, this is what we are after. What should be done for making it happen? I think there are 3 components to mention. First of all, it was mentioned that just do something about it at the legislative level. We did it, but we failed. We have to admit. Maybe it's just because Minfin just had given a warning all along that nothing should be actually drafted. Are you talking about 131? Yes, indeed. And they realized that we'd better not write anything instead of trying to over-regulate and just setting up some insurmountable barriers which would just squeeze everybody into the bottleneck where we could not get out of. And nothing actually worked out of it. Let's just make another attempt. Participatory payments of citizens. That's what we need to reflect in the budgetary code. How are the participatory budgeting projects appearing? In most instances, if a region is supportive of providing subsidies for this initiative, they can easily say that it's just I'm supporting only this practice and nothing else by my subsidies, which would not prevent a municipality from getting subsidies or implementing any other project at their own cost. Let's have 100 flowers flourishing, so we will find something which is to our liking. And what we need is actually to maybe make a separation between this initially participating payments and maybe without just full coverage and maybe carryovers and so on, or balances, and that's it. And we could limit ourselves to one statement, that the implementation of the participatory budget projects are delegated to the mandate of local authorities. That's it. And every municipality could do anything they like, and the region would be able to support what they find appropriate. We're facing a challenge of disseminating best practice and ensuring and boosting peer experience sharing frameworks, and I will support you on that. We have something on our website, and you're welcome to actually take a look at it. We will definitely continue working on this front. Yeah. Minfin, independent analytical centers, and all other stakeholders should be under pressure because they should be just actually pushed to look at it more frequently. So when we did issue methodological recommendations, guidelines, we need to set up a practice dissemination network Otherwise, we are running a risk of actually losing momentum in terms of the interest in this topic. We did include this topic first time this year into the main FAN state program. So we criticized by the international community for that, because they were saying, how come that you don't have anything at the federal level? Now we do have it. And we worked without state program. Now we would be even better off at that. So now there is a KPI, the number of actually regions covered by this practice. I expect it to grow up to 85. But what is important is to make sure that they are supported by serious quality changes. And the last question, which you would most likely discuss further, financial support, financial resources, financing. We already have a project of setting up a comfortable urban environment project, so 25 million rubles, which is twice as much compared to the overall participatory budgeting financial port. And actually people say it's not about participatory budgeting at all. Sometimes that's what we hear. But so yeah, I hear you to give a sigh of relief, I hear here. So as it has been said, what you have, and it's up to you to pick up. But you should be also understanding what the Ministry of Construction would think. You understand that it's not an easy thing actually to go through all these things of electronic payments and everything, and they are answerable for every penny. So that's why all along they suggest that it should be limited to a very limited number of projects, but they are also in demand.
But how can a region select these projects? And the Ministry of Construction doesn't object to it. Any right approaches to engage citizens is the right thing to do. Yaroslavl Oblast, I think, is a case in point, because they found a way of integrating what is being done under the Shaping the Livable Urban Environment project with participatory budgeting. Let's go all for a study tour to Yaroslavl to learn from this experience on the ground. And this is a case in point because it's one of the national projects that is currently being implemented. And of course, the Ministry of Construction wants to be praised and raved for its participation, but it hasn't come fully on board, but because it needs to report on the funding, but it will be a trial effort for them, and our objective is to convince them that as part of participatory budgeting, there is a very good and workable way of selecting projects that are in high demand by the public living in particular municipalities. So if we focus on these three objectives, we will be able to will be where we want to be, exporting best practice and getting the best spillovers. Mr. Lavrov, thank you very much for a brilliant speech. Colleagues, unfortunately, we're out of time. If we could convert the questions into suggestions. Now, two questions related to Federal Law 44, that it obstructs the proliferation of participatory budgeting. I'm not sure how it creates obstacles for PB practices. The second is, can we step away from financial contributions of citizens? Is there a way of avoiding this? Well, if initiative or participatory projects are embedded in the budget code, this will be a mandatory requirement. And the third question is to implement IT technologies in promoting participatory budgeting. And I think we have good examples of that. So as we're drawing to a close, let me say a few words before I turn to Mr. Lavrov before we do the awards ceremony. So before we do that, let me just say that I'm very happy that we gathered here today, and it's always good to find new horizons for promoting performance budgeting. So thank you very much for your input. Mr. Lavrov, the floor is yours. Dear colleagues, before we move I would like to thank Mr. Duarte. We will very soon see the final ceremony, and our region, Sakha-Yakutia, is one of the contenders. We will all root for it, so hopefully it will win in the final ceremony. Hopefully it will be just as spectacular as the final game of the recent World Cup, and hopefully Russia will gain one of the prominent places there. Now, moving on to our award ceremony. This will probably be a good input in international experience. There are several nominees pertaining to the open budget processes and citizens budget processes and participatory budget projects. So the nominee for promoting participatory budgeting processes, we would like to present an award to the Ministry of Finance's Stavropol Krai, and the award goes to Mr. Paliev. Colleagues, Stavropol Krai is one of the champions, if not the strongest champion of participatory budgeting, so the award is quite well placed. In the nomination of the budget for citizens budget, the award goes to Viktor Kopytok, Grigory Tsitkov, and Yuri Vereshchagin for the open budget of the city of Troitsk. In the same nomination, on behalf of the legal entities, we would like to award the committee of the Financial Committee of the City of Bratsk, Deputy Finance Minister of the Bratsk Municipality, the guideline for the Bratsk City budget. I believe we can close the first part of our session. I would like to wish you every success in your follow-up work, and we look forward to your comments. Thank you.